Okay, and considering the workload, and you mentioned the aging population earlier, you talked, what, 150 private practice attorneys like Stephen. What would be the ideal magic number? You know, are you where you need to be from a staffing standpoint, or could you use more assistance based on the number of calls that you're receiving?
That's a really important question, especially so today. We are facing an economic crisis, as you know. The number of callers and clients that we're getting has increased greatly. From 07 to 08, a 15% increase. Year to date, 09, a 30% increase versus the same time last year. It is absolutely essential that anyone who can support legal aid does so. The stats that we've seen, nearly 1/5 of the population of Nebraska is eligible for our services. Other stats show that every low-income people who fits in that criteria has a legal problem at least once every year or once every 2 years. Based on that information, we are only able to help about 15% of the folks that have a legal need. That means there are 85% of the people who are eligible for our services who are not getting their legal needs met. And that's a real problem. And you see it because you hear these reports, it was even on CNN, the New York Times, Chief Justice Heavican mentioned it in his State of the Courts address in January. There are more and more people who are going to court without an attorney. They're unrepresented, and frankly, they don't know what they're doing. And I'm sure Willie could comment on this now. If he and his wife had to go forward into court against this landlord on their own, they wouldn't know what to do.
All of them lost the case.
Exactly, and that's the story for a lot of folks right now. That because we have limited resources, there are only so many folks to help them. So I think it's absolutely essential for whether it's other attorneys who want to take on cases like Steve. Now again, we only have so much funding to pay for private attorneys, and it's certainly not mandatory to take on cases for free in the state. So what we hope for is for folks who maybe believe in our mission to help folks like Willie and others with their legal problems to donate. If we can build our resources up, we can hire more staff. With more staff, we can help more folks. It's really a very simple equation.
Well, absolutely, and based on this program alone, I mean, you were talking about the number of calls you receive earlier. That number obviously is going to go up after this program airs, and so we really want to make sure we're doing what we can to put that number of attorneys and some other assistants up as well, so that you can try to meet the demand.
Absolutely.
Stephen, I want to go back to when you agreed to help Legal Aid of Nebraska. I think we all have this, not all of us, but some of us have this general stigma associated with attorneys that you're just out to make as much money as you can and really fight those big battles and all the rest. And I'm hearing your story, and that's not at all what you're telling us.
I always joke everybody always hates attorneys till they need one. Then all of a sudden it's a different story. But when I first got out, I didn't quite, and I came from, I guess I would say, the perfect family. My parents were perfect in every way, shape, and form, I would say. But I've seen over the years the types of things that happen with interpersonal skills between family relationships, and it would astound you, some of the abuse that individuals have sustained. And it's, once you see that a couple times, you don't want them to have to go through it again. And usually by the time they've contacted Nebraska Legal Aid, they've finally started to break that cycle of abuse where they are willing to take the next step. I mean, when a mother has to, or again, generalizing to mothers, but when a person has to pick up their children to get them away from an abusive situation or a dangerous situation and literally move out of the house and go to a safe house or a crisis center or something of that nature, that they have to remove themselves from the situation, they've taken that good step of saying, you know what, I'm going to break this cycle of abuse, I'm not going to go back to it, and as being an attorney, if you can help them then take that lunge forward and be out of it, makes you feel pretty good.
Well, and hopefully people that are watching will hear that message, and we do want to apologize for people who are watching. There is some construction going on nearby today, so if
They're not bleeping out what he said.
Right, and we've never had to bleep, so we're hoping that with an attorney especially, we won't have to do that today, but there is some construction going on, so bear with us, and we appreciate you doing that. Now, Dave, for those people who are watching who don't necessarily qualify for your programs and services, residents of Nebraska, how is it that they benefit by Legal Aid of Nebraska being around?
Sure. There are a lot of ways that folks benefit, and I'll just go through a few of them. First of all, we do a lot to make sure that there is great legal information on our website. So whether you're a client of ours or not, you can go to our website and access any number of our handbooks about consumer law, landlord-tenant, divorce, bankruptcy, and get a lot of the information you need as to whether or not you even need a lawyer and what your rights are. So we do that, and that's a free service for everyone. You just need to go to our website, which is legalaidofnebraska.com, and get that information. Second of all, we are an economic engine for the state. Here at UNO, there's a professor who does an economic impact analysis of our work, and he has determined that for every dollar of state funds that are invested in legal aid, anywhere between $4 and $5 are returned to the state economy. And how does that work? Well, we're helping folks get their public benefits from the federal government. That brings money into the state. If we help an elderly person stay in their homestead and not get kicked out and end up on public housing, that saves money for the state. That brings more money to the state. And there are a lot of other areas. So we benefit the folks who don't qualify for our services that way as well. And it's, the folks that we represent are not just, distinct individuals outside of the mainstream. These are friends, families, and neighbors of other folks within Nebraska. I mean, I said 1/5 of the population qualifies. I mean, for every person that's out there, everyone else probably knows or is related to or is friends with, goes to church with, someone who has been helped by legal aid or represented by legal aid. So there's this multiplier effect. For every person we help, that's someone who's more self-sufficient and if we're helping them get out of a situation and back into work or stay in their homes or be able to pay taxes because they're working again, that benefits the state as well. And there's also something really key, I think, that gets to the heart of, I think, the democratic ideal, which is access to the courts. We are a nation of laws, and it's the rule of law that really makes things work. It's what makes us different than a totalitarian dictatorship country or something else. It's because you can, if you have a dispute, if you have a civil dispute with someone else or an entity or an organization, you can get your dispute resolved in court.
Through you. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to get these graphics up for the end of the program to make sure that people know where they're going, websites and so forth. So if we could just hold that thought for a second. Really important we get this up for folks who've been watching today. Statewide access line, you have the number there. And then the rural response hotline, 800-464-0258. We have another one, I believe. And then you have the Native American hotline and the Elder Access line. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We've gained a lot of information. Thanks to those of you at home for watching. We will see you next week.
Produced by UNO Television.